Hello and welcome. I'm Sophie Cruz, and you're tuning into Rappler Talk. Joining us today is European lawmaker Hannah Neumann, who is heading a delegation from the EU Parliament's Subcommittee on Human Rights while they visit Manila this week. The mission is part of efforts between the Philippines and Europe to cooperate on human rights and reforms in the justice sector. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Sophia, and it's a pleasure to be at Rappler, finally and in person.
Yes, it's a pleasure for us as well to have you here. You've had a packed schedule for your 3-day mission to the country, which will later wrap up the day. From your visit so far, I just want to ask you a big picture question. What issues continue to be key areas of concern when it comes to human rights here in the Philippines?
The EU and the Philippines have always had a very close and special relationship, and this will continue. People in the Philippines traveling, working in the European Union, us having business here, loving to come here as tourists. So the people-to-people relations work super well. When it comes to politics, we have also struggled with the Duterte administration, frankly said. And part of our mission this time was to see how things are possibly changing, how, again, the administration is opening up more under Marcos Jr. From the human rights side, let's say the key areas in which we were looking are, well, it's not going to surprise you much, the issue of the war on drugs, how the new administration deals with the extrajudicial killings that happened in the past, but also how the policy is possibly, and we hope so, evolving towards more focus on prevention and rehabilitation. We are looking into the situation of human rights defenders, of journalists, of free media. Red tagging has been an issue, for many, many years in the Philippines, threatening human rights defenders who are so crucial to make a country work. And then, of course, the trade relations that have a human rights component. And I know this has been the issue also of some political debate here domestically.
Mm-hmm. Right, and we're going to talk about all of that, cover all that ground during this interview. But let's start first with your visit to your meeting with Senator Leila De Lima, former Senator Leila De Lima. Today, of course, marks her 6th year in prison, and I understand that during your visit, you also held a meeting with her. Can you tell us more about that?
We have been following the case of Senator Leila De Lima over many years, and as you indeed say, it's the 6th anniversary of her being in prison on, well, so far, arbitrary charges that are starting to collapse one by one. So 6 years in prison for, well, having dared to speak up politically against a former president's war on drugs. And she hasn't seen her grandchildren for more than 3 years. We all know how much and how fast children grow in that time. So I have to say, I was quite impressed to meet a strong, proud, very positive woman after all she had to endure also recently, with the kidnapping in prison. We are hopeful that at least there will soon be a release on bail while the legal proceedings are ongoing. Let's see, but it was a very intense and emotional moment, maybe even more for us than for her.
Yes, you've been calling for her immediate release over the last few years. And was this something that you also raised during your meeting with Justice Secretary Remulla?
Yes, indeed. We just met him after we came out of the prison visit. So, of course, we mentioned to him that we were visiting her and that we would hope for, Justice frankly said, to speed up and to be fair on her, which would indeed most likely lead to her release.
Yeah. What was the Secretary's response to your remarks?
Well, he said, continuously he's looking into it and that they are also trying to explore avenues with, I think, something like heinous, I don't know exactly how it works, heinous bail or something. So I think everyone is aware of the situation and wants to solve it in a positive way. And now let's just hope it quickly happens.
Yes, definitely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I wanted to talk to you as well about, of course, the trade relations. You had a meeting with Trade Secretary Alfredo Pascual. But, during the Duterte administration, the Parliament has consistently called on the EU Commission to withdraw the GSP Plus if no substantial improvement in human rights was seen in the Philippines. Why do you think this never really materialized, despite, the situation in the Philippines and also your continuous calls for that?
the issue of trade, and especially the trade scheme that the EU has with the Philippines, GSP Plus, it's not an easy thing. I mean, first of all, GSP Plus means the Philippines gets easier access to the European market. But it's not just this. It comes with the commitment of the Philippines to improve labor standards, to improve human rights standards, to improve environmental standards. And it's not, first of all, it's a deal between the Philippines and the EU. So it's not that the EU imposes something on the Philippines, but it's the two sides coming together on eye level and saying that's the deal we want to have. Mm-hmm. And of course, I mean, we never put into question the preferential trade access. But it comes with the second leg. And frankly said, this is even more so in the interest of the Filipino government and the Filipino people, because we want the trade relation to be one that benefits the Filipino people, which means, for example, fair labor standards, which means to make sure that also if our companies invest in the Philippines, this is done in a way that doesn't harm indigenous communities. So this is the idea behind it. Under the Duterte administration, indeed, I mean, we have seen that many of the human rights conventions, for example, that the Philippines signed up to previously haven't been upheld. The war on drugs being just the most obvious of the problems. And then, I mean, it's on us to say, okay, but it's a deal between the two. And if you don't honor the one, well, we will put into question the other one. At the same time, of course, everyone is quite conscious that if we limit trade or if we just enforce proper taxes, that's what would be to revoke GSP Plus on the Filipino citizens, well, it may most likely not harm Duterte, but it would harm Filipino citizens. So it has always been a very difficult decision to call, and frankly said, I think we were all hoping for either Duterte to really do a U-turn, which didn't happen. But for now, the new government, and these are the first signals that we see, to adopt a more constructive approach.
Right. Are you more hopeful of the Philippines meeting its commitments, its end of the deal as well under the new administration?
Let me put it like this. President Marcos came into power in July. He was elected in May, he came into power in July. So this is 8 months now. And we are trying to assess the development over the 8 months. And what we clearly see is a president that is more open to the international community, a president that travels the world, an administration that is really picking up the challenge to discuss the sensitive issues with us. So we had discussions on the war on drugs, we had discussions on labor standards that were honest and frank. Now we have to see on the implementation. This is the next step. But in terms of the rhetoric, indeed, things are changing. Well, but yes, we are far from being perfect. We still see extrajudicial killings happen, maybe not announced and encouraged by the president, but they continue to happen and they have to stop. We see civil society activists still being attacked. This has to stop. We had the tripartite mission of the International Labour Organization. They have made a number of recommendations. They need to be implemented. We saw the Philippines accepting so many recommendations under the Universal Periodic Review, which is the UN framework in which every country, also Germany, is being criticized to improve. Accepting them is good, well, but they need to be implemented. And maybe one last item that is very crucial, and that is why we had the meeting with Secretary Remulla. Our European companies, when they make the decision, do they invest in the Philippines or do they invest in any other country around the world? They look before all into the justice system. Is it fair? Is it speedy? Are the laws working for us? Before they make the investment, because they want to make sure it's long time, well, and it's not going to be jeopardized by corruption or by bought justice deals. So this is why delivering fair and speedy justice is, of course, I mean, first of all, a good service to Filipino citizens. But it would be also key to make sure that the agenda of economic growth that the new president clearly has will work out.
Right. Were there concrete commitments made then by the Philippines in your meetings with Secretary Remulla and Secretary Pascual when it comes to exactly that, ensuring that the environment is also good for business from European companies?
Well, they clearly announced that they are working on making sure that the justice system is going to be faster, that they are at the moment changing certain laws. For example, when it comes to for specific investment in solar or renewable energy, for example, can it be fully foreign owned or does it have to have Filipino national partners? So I think they are aware, they are looking into it. And maybe we would have to assess, let's say, a year further down the road, once they had a reasonable chance to implement.
Right. I also understand that the GSP Plus is expiring soon and a new scheme will be introduced soon. You did mention that, of course, attacks against activists, extrajudicial killings still take place. Do you foresee stronger human rights benchmarks that the Philippines will need to comply with, or in order for it to benefit from the new scheme? And if so, what might those look like?
So the current scheme expires December this year. And then there will be a 2 years transition period until there will be a decision on a possible reapplication of the Philippines. And I assume the talks that we had, they would want to reapply either under the GSP Plus, or if we're discussing about middle income countries, a free trade agreement. But in the end, the deal is going to be the same. Trade privileges coming with requests on social standards, human rights standards, and also environmental standards. We are at the moment in the European Union in the negotiations of what exactly the new GSP Plus scheme would look like. What is clear, the benchmarks on human rights, social standards, environment will rather grow. And indeed, we, on behalf of the European Parliament, are fighting very hard that there will be not just, at the moment, it's like, okay, the country needs to ratify Convention ABCD. Philippines have ratified all of that, and then they need to implement, and we will check on the implementation. I'm pretty sure there will be more concrete and precise benchmarks against which the performance of a certain country can be measured. There will be more often evaluation and revision. So it's not going to get easier, and I really hope that the administration, because we want to see this trade growing in everyone's interest, uses the 2 years of transition to implement what they want to implement. And frankly said, it's not only going to attract more European investments and strengthen trade with Europe. I mean, the American market is not so different. The Australian one isn't that different. The Japanese one isn't that different. So aside of it benefiting the people, because, I mean, they have a safer environment and better working conditions, and benefiting the economic growth with the European Union, it is really going to strengthen the Philippines, also in competition with the other partners in the neighboring countries.
Yeah, and we know that competition is, of course, fierce. It's present, and there are a lot of there are also a lot of countries looking to attract the same market as the Philippines. You mentioned measurements as well that will be reviewed, taken in that 2-year transition, and one of this, perhaps, I assume, would be the ongoing ICC, the ongoing investigation into in the International Criminal Court. Just a few days before your mission, Philippine lawmakers actually passed resolutions to defend former President Rodrigo Duterte against the ICC. And there have been statements as well as from both the administration and from Congress, opposing any visits by ICC officials into the Philippines. Did you tackle this in your meetings with senators and representatives? And what was your response? What was the exchange like on that?
Well, we tackled it in all of our meetings, but it's not that we came here and wanted to discuss the ICC, but of course we came here and we wanted to discuss on what is going to happen on all these extrajudicial killings happening in the past, especially given that new President Marcos announced that he wants accountability, he wants to fight impunity. And I understand the matter is quite complicated, and we heard, various positions from it's an infringement in our sovereignty towards please come and help us, because it's so many cases and it will be overburdening our judicial system to do it. Maybe let's start with the sovereignty issue.
Right.
we have a rather well-working justice system in the European Union. I mean, I would still have ideas on how to change it, but overall, I would say it's working. Nevertheless, all EU member states are actually signatories to the Rome Statute and under ICC jurisdiction, because we believe in the added value of having this international layer of sorting out stuff. Even me and another member of our delegation, we have asked the ICC to investigate into certain things that are going wrong in our own countries and to just check if they are in accordance with international law. So for us, ICC is something that helps us to become better in adhering to the laws, that are one of the foundations of our living together. Now we have discussed the issue of extrajudicial killings and how you can create accountability. Well, already the question of how many of these extrajudicial killings happened seems to be up for political debate in the Philippines at the moment. Some say it's like 3,000. Senator De La Rosa himself spoke of about 6,000. Civil society organizations say 30,000. Let's take the number of 6,000, because apparently, Senator De La Rosa has had some involvement, so let's credit him for having the most accurate number. If you are sincere about accountability, you would now have to file 6,000 investigations for each of the extrajudicial killings. So you listen to witnesses, you look at whatever there is in terms of evidence, and then see if, the offender or the possible offender can be acquitted or sentenced. This is a huge part of work, and I would just encourage everyone, if you want to increase the credibility of accountability, and if you want to just support the Philippine justice system in processing all these cases, just receive ICC with open arms as a helping hand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I assume, of course, that you discussed the ongoing justice review the justice panel's review on the killings under the Duterte administration's drug war. How do you view the performance and the pace of that? Because I think that's also one thing that the UN did draw attention to, slow process of that, and how cases haven't really been filed, or basically investigations haven't been closed, right? Does that and the ongoing ICC investigation, does it have will it have a big impact, let's say, when it comes to reviewing whether or not the Philippines will be able to benefit again from GSP plus, and also just your general view on how that's going after you've also had your talks with the Justice Secretary?
The war on drugs, and especially the huge amount of killings. Just one killing is too many, but we are talking about at least 6,000. Has really tarnished the reputation of the Philippines abroad. Because, even I lived in this country 20 years ago and have been going back and forth. I love this country. And the people, and I have seen it progress in terms of democracy, and then this is happening, which in our understanding is just outstandingly brutal. And also socially unjust, because it targets the most poor. So really, I think to restart a positive international reputation of the Philippines, this has to be dealt with in a credible way. Now we're looking at, again, 6,000 cases. The current administration saying, okay, we can take care of that our own. 9 months down the road, 6,000 cases, 6,000 extrajudicial killings, 30 court proceedings, or 25, 3 people convicted. 6,000 to 3. It doesn't match at all. So again, see the ICC as a way to clearly give you basically the international stamp that you're serious about accountability, and as a way to support in that process. This is how I really hope the new administration will see it. On the GSP Plus, it was the one issue that concerned us the most. I'm not saying there's no other problems, but other countries also have their problems. But this one is just outstandingly brutal. And the ILO tripartite mission also said that there should at least be a presidential commission also tasked with the prevention of this happening again. So yes, it is clearly linked. And yes, I mean, we said in all the communications around the GSP Plus, death penalty is a crucial issue for the European Union. We are very happy to hear that the new administration has no intention to go back to death penalty. But extrajudicial killing is basically death penalty without due process. So it's even worse.
Right. You mentioned a while ago that, if the Philippines were serious about accountability, they should see the ICC as sort of a support, or essentially something that doesn't go against this. I mean, is working towards the same issue, right? Of course, it was in the news that when you met with lawmakers, including Senator Bato de la Rosa, who was, of course, Duterte's first police chief and was very much involved in the drug war. He accused, European lawmakers of interfering with Philippine affairs and sovereignty when it passed resolutions calling out the drug war as well. I just want to get more of your thoughts on that, because how do you view, or how did that exchange go, and what was your response to that? Because you were saying that it shouldn't clash with one another, right? That it actually, one supports the other.
Well, it was, frankly said, quite an unfortunate start of our mission. I mean, I have lived here for a long time, but most of my colleagues, it was the first time that they were in the Philippines. It was our first meeting in the Senate. We said 1.5 hours in a closed-door meeting where we had a very honest but constructive discussion where every side was presenting how they see things, where we worked for a lot of common ground. And we just walked out of the meeting with Senator Tolentino. And then we were told that Senator De La Rosa, who left 30 minutes earlier to go to another meeting, had said that it was very tense and that we accused them and he had to defend the sovereignty of the Philippines. And I mean, everyone in my delegation was flabbergasted, and so was Senator Tolentino, because this really didn't happen. So it clearly shows how Senator De La Rosa, apparently for, let's say, self-promotion, kind of put the positive EU-Filipino relation that we were trying to build into question, into jeopardy. And, well, I mean, in short, sadly, we also experienced the prevalence of fake news and disinformation in Filipino politics firsthand.
Right. But that was unfortunate, right? But were there also perhaps concrete commitments that were made by lawmakers in the Philippines to address that? Of course, because you also met with them aside from Justice Secretary.
So it is a bit, as I said in the beginning, there were a lot of commitments to speed up justice processes, to look into the extrajudicial killings, but domestically, that has been made very clear. Something that gives me a lot of hope is that next week the House of Representatives will discuss the Human Rights Defenders Bill, finally. I mean, it has been filed first by Senator De Lima, I think in 2018, so many years ago. But it would be a crucial step to say that all those who want to help bring issues up, to investigating corruption, to make sure that social justice is being served, to expose companies when they violate environmental rights, for example. They are not seen as enemies of the state, but as an important resource to make this state work better and being protected. And I hope it will also pass the Senate, and it will change some of the perspective of people, let's say, that are being critical how governance is served in certain areas, are not seen as enemies, but as those who actually want to make this state work better and work for everyone. So in terms of announcement, also when it comes to the decongestion of prisons, there have been a lot of positive announcements. And so I think our mission came at a crucial point. But well, be assured, we, together with many other members of the international community, are going to follow up. And we are hopeful that we can basically flip the page of the Duterte presidency and really engage in a more constructive way with each other again. One thing I really enjoyed, because I was here, as I said, the first time about 18 years ago. When we had discussions also with Filipino authorities back then, often the international said something and then the reaction was like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And nothing happened. And now we really had this honest discussion where you can fight, I mean, in a constructive way, but you can exchange arguments. You can agree to disagree, but you can also agree on where you want to move ahead together. So it was a more eye-level discussion, and I think this is what we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting also that point of view, first, because you've been here for so long, and so you've kind of seen how the government has taken its stance. I mean, how it's evolved over time. I'm So how would you assess the current Philippine administration's approach to human rights? You did mention there is more of that frank exchange, but still a lot of areas that need to see improvement. Are you satisfied so far with the response? And what perhaps should the government prioritize when it comes to addressing those immediate concerns?
I mean, the culture of violence in this country, and it hasn't started with Duterte, it goes back for a long time. But of course, it has become kind of a new legitimacy and a new growth under Duterte is not going to go away if only you change the president, right? Also, the fear of many people, for example, to claim their rights hasn't started with Duterte, but I mean, it has grown a lot with Duterte, and it's not going to go away only if there's a new president. So I think the people in the Philippines, many of those who have been subject to kind of repression, oppression, and Rappler has been part of that, now need to hopefully they can have a growing confidence that again they can be more outspoken, they can claim their rights. And so the trust of the international community has to grow that whatever they promise, they are sincere. And this is kind of the moment where we are now. We heard all the promises, we are happy about all the promises, yet let's see how much they are really going to be implemented. And I can't tell you, I mean, who am I to know that better than you or anyone? What I can tell you is we are happy about the positive language. We are going to scrutinize the follow-up.
Right. I think just perhaps as a last question, this I assume won't be the last visit that the European Parliament will make. For now, though, what message do you want to leave with the Philippine government and also the Filipino public when it comes to your role in monitoring and defending human rights here in the Philippines?
Our relations have been super close on a people-to-people level when it comes to trade, but also when it comes to protecting international law. The Philippines have always voted for us, for example, in the Security Council when it comes to the Russian aggression in Ukraine that today has its first anniversary. And of course, we are supporting the Philippines in their struggles in the South China Sea with China because it's international law that makes this world more peaceful and that everyone adheres to it. And no one puts that into question. We want this to grow. But we want it to grow in a way that's going to serve every Filipino. So we want it to grow based on good social and labor standards. We want it to grow based on press freedom. We want it to grow based on the promise to a democracy that is maybe the most vibrant one in Southeast Asia, but we want it to stay that way. And sometimes it has been under jeopardy in the past. So if that is what the new administration wants, we are there with open arms, and we are there with technical support and expertise and the willingness to exchange. For example, how can you make trial detention shorter? This is a very concrete thing. It's a big problem here. We have solved some issues. How to combat fake news. Every country around the world is going through that at the moment, and our societies are not that different, our media systems. So we can just learn from each other, you know? This is the openness and the willingness that is there. President Duterte has basically slammed the door into our face. At the moment, the door is open again.
Right. So definitely several moving parts that you'll be monitoring that we'll also be monitoring with you. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today and for making time to speak with us and share your insights. We look forward to having you back in the newsroom again, perhaps in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Rappler Talk. I'm Sophie Thomas Cruz. Tune in again next time.